Good morning, UUCA. Okay, let's try that one more time. I know y'all have a reputation, okay? So don't let that reputation down for me, okay? Good morning, UUCA. It's so great to be with you all this morning. What a lot of folks don't know about me is, in addition to what Sonia shared about who I am and what I do, I'm also a fourth-generation Pentecostal preacher's kid. So buckle up. You know, when I came out to my parents 14 years ago, my dad came up to me and said, I don't want to say son, but you know who. You're supposed to be the fifth-generation preacher in the family. I said, Dad, I am. I'm just not preaching the way you wanted me to. Well, that was the last time I spoke to him. Okay? But I honor that tradition because it has allowed me to show up the way that I show up today. My name is Gabrielle Claiborne. My pronouns are she, her. I am co-founder and CEO of Transformation Journeys Worldwide. We are an inclusion training consulting firm with a trans and gender expansive focus. We work with a myriad of Fortune 100 and 500 global organizations, helping them on their journey of transforming their environments to be fully inclusive for trans and non-binary folks. And I don't know about y'all, but I'm glad that I don't need to decide if I'm a Warhol or a unicorn today. Are y'all okay? You know, I'm so excited about being with you all here today because this has been a long time coming. I know a lot of folks here in this community, and they've been trying to get me here, and I'm so glad that I have an opportunity to spend just a few minutes with you this morning to talk about a topic that is very near and dear to my heart: authenticity and the power of community. And I want to hopefully invite you to get comfortable being uncomfortable in the spirit of learning to do better. You know, oftentimes when I talk with clients, I share with them what you're willing to get out, what you get out of a conversation is what you're willing to invest in it. So I really want to invite you to lean into this conversation with ears to hear, eyes to see, hearts to understand, and hopefully feet to take action. Can I get that commitment from you all? Turn to your neighbor and say, I'm committed to be uncomfortable today. Okay. I'm a school teacher up here today, okay? Brene Brown says, authenticity is the practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. You know, when I think about this as it relates to my own lived experience, me living authentically means living my life fiercely, out loud, unapologetically, without allowing others' expectations to determine who I should be and how I should show up. Now, you might be thinking, Gabrielle, that is so much easier said than done. And I totally agree with you. Because, see, it took me years to let go of the person I thought I was supposed to be and whom others expected me to be. So I'd like for you to think about this a little bit this morning with me. What might authenticity look like for you? Is there a vocational interest that you've wanted to explore? Is there a relationship that perhaps you might need to get honest about? Is there a passion that you've had sitting on the back burner for way too long now? Are you actually considering your second or third act in life, wherever you are in your life? Well, as I contemplated what authenticity might look like for me, I realized that it would be totally contrary to the expectations of my friends and family, to my colleagues in my workplace, to my friends and family in my spiritual community, and to a culture that really didn't understand the expansiveness of gender, in that one's biological sex doesn't always determine a person's gender. It was these expectations that contributed to me living 40 years, that's me, of my life in a place of constant unrest, burdened by fear and confusion, in a place that was not in integrity with my heart. And I did this because I feared the rejection and discrimination from others. I feared losing my relationships with my family, with my friends, with my Creator, and losing a career that I spent 30 years of my life building. I thought that if I'd stepped into my yes, who I was always meant to be, that I would risk losing everything. But with every courageous step I took, I realized that my fear of losing everything paled in comparison to the regret of denying the truth of who I was always meant to be. Did you get that? Okay? This realization set me on a course of taking some very frightening steps that I didn't even know where they would lead me. Some of these steps resulted in pushback from family and friends. Some of them resulted in me being jobless and homeless for a season. And it was during these challenging times that my friend and now business partner, Linda Herzer, who is with us this morning, wave your hand, Linda. She shared a piece of wisdom with me. She reminded me, Gabrielle, life is meant to be lived in the moment. Yes, it's great to have our goals, and we all have goals. But how you show up today determines your tomorrow. Our job is to learn from today's lessons so that we can create a better tomorrow for ourselves and others around us. Over time, as I honored her sage advice and stayed the course, I began to realize that even though the form of my relationships with my family and friends were changing, and even though I had to repurpose my career, I began experiencing the view on the other side of authenticity. And I just have to say, it was more beautiful than ever. Having navigated some difficult seasons in my life, I am now rebuilding my relationships on a solid, unshakable foundation of honesty, trust, and integrity. This here is a picture of me and my 3 kids. You know, oftentimes people ask, Gabrielle, how are your kids how have they been around your transition? And my response is, it depends on what day you ask me, because their response are different. You know, as much as this has been my journey, it's their journey as well. And in the process, I have learned important things like learning to hold space for them, showing how to love them from a distance, continually reassuring them that they're actually getting a better version of me. Over time, they're starting to make peace with this in their own ways. And, you know, sometimes it's 2 steps forwards and 1 step back, but I embrace every moment that I have with them. Now my work is focused on creating a world that works for everyone, inviting and hopefully inspiring others to live as their most authentic self, to say yes to their yes. Now, I share all this with you this morning because as a transgender woman, oftentimes people think that my journey of authenticity is so unlike their own that there are no common themes. But this is not the case. The reason being is that the journey of authenticity is not a respecter of persons. It requires all of us to act on the same universal truths in order for us to live our best lives, regardless of what our individual lived experiences are. In my self-help memoir, Embrace Your Truth, The Journey of Authenticity, and like every good author, I have books with me. So if you'd like to learn more about my book, I invite you to stop by the table to learn more. But in this book, I share these universal truths, what all of us must do to embrace our authenticity. Things like learning to listen to our hearts. Did you know your heart speaks to you in 5 different languages? Through your emotions, feelings, intuitions, dreams, and bodily symptoms. And get my book to learn more about those. I believe we must learn to hear and understand these languages, y'all, because we live in a culture that frowns on listening and living from our heart. We are conditioned to rationalize in our mind and ask things like, does that step make sense? Is this decision safe for me to make? Is that opportunity too risky to pursue? You see, if you didn't already know, our mind's job is to keep us safe in a place of comfort and familiarity. Consequently, many of us get stuck in what I call a place of inauthenticity. But what I've learned is that our hearts will not mislead us. So I believe we must learn how to trust and act on that still small voice that our heart has been trying to tell us, some of us, for many years. You know, in order to embrace our authenticity, another thing that I believe we must do is develop a support system around us. I'll let you know that the journey of authenticity is not meant to be traveled alone. Had it not been for my support system cheering me on as I felt like I couldn't take another step, when I felt all alone, I shudder to think where I would be today. You see, your support system becomes your lifeline when you feel like giving up. Now, because embracing our truths doesn't always bring us accolades and approval from others, a third thing that we must do is we must learn to love ourselves. We've heard this before, love yourself. But this is the perspective I'd like to share. You know, on those days when we receive little to no affirmation from the outside world, when our minds are taunting us with questions like, am I doing the right thing? Should I have stayed in my old job? Should I have stayed in that old relationship? Will my family ever accept me? Will I be okay? We have to be able to look within and like what we see. I've also learned that embracing our past by forgiving ourselves and others is yet another important step that we must take in embracing our truth. You know, unforgiveness is like stabbing ourselves with a knife and expecting the person that did us wrong to feel the pain. Does that relate to anybody in here? I feel like we have to understand that forgiveness is not for the other person. Forgiveness is for ourselves. It's something we do for ourselves. If we refuse to forgive, we cling to self-defeating feelings of shame, blame, hurt, and resentment. But if we forgive, this is like an emotional house cleaning. It lets us make room for the good that we desire. With forgiveness, we can let go of the past and turn to other things, more important things in our life, such as how to be truly happy, how to thrive, with a sense that we are joyfully fulfilling our life's purpose. Another universal truth I think we all need to do in order to embrace our truth is that we must be able to persevere through pushback. You know, as we begin to embrace various facets of our authentic self, the pushback that we receive may come in the form of questions like, don't you care what this is doing to me? Aren't you being selfish? Oh my goodness. How many times I had to really sit and ponder and wrestle with these questions. But you know what? The more I did, I realized that there is a significant difference in being selfish and self-honoring. Understanding this, I realized that to bring the best version of myself to my friends and loved ones, to my colleagues in the workplace, to my spiritual community, and to the world, I had to first be my authentic self. After all, I can only be honest with others to the degree that I'm willing to be honest with myself. So you might be thinking, Gabrielle, if authenticity is so beneficial, then why aren't more people living authentically? Well, I think one answer to this question is because we become so focused on the perceived risk of the pain and loss that we might experience as a result of living as our authentic self, that we fail to notice that there's also a price to pay for living inauthentically. And I think this is the part of authenticity that many of us miss. My goodness, I missed this for 40 years of my life. What I didn't know then that I now know is that authenticity, living inauthentically, comes at an even greater cost. You see, with every inauthentic step I took, I created greater distance between myself and my loved ones, my friends, my spiritual community, and even myself. I built my life on an unstable foundation of sinking sand. Consequently, over the last 14 years, I've had to live my life, as I've lived my life authentically, I have had to spend time repairing the damage that I left in my inauthentic wake. Y'all, it's like getting into debt. Getting into debt is so easy and can happen instantaneously. Getting out of debt is a whole other story. Debt impacts our credit. It requires financial sacrifices, and it takes years to overcome. Well, living inauthentically has the same impact on our lives. Well, after I started repairing the damage that I had left in my inauthentic wake, I learned that the world was actually getting a better version of me. After coming out to my youngest daughter, Samantha, during those early years in my transition, she spent time getting to know the real me. And one evening we were out to dinner. She surprised me by saying, she said, Gabrielle, out of respect of my gender identity, my daughter calls me Gabrielle, even though she acknowledges and honors me as her parent. She says, Gabrielle, you're actually a better parent now as your authentic self. Y'all, I was floored when I heard her say this. I realized that living authentically was not only benefiting me, but now it was benefiting her. And as time has gone on, I have seen how aspects of being authentic has benefited my life. I am now a better friend, colleague, business owner, mentor, partner, parent, and grandparent. I don't want to see anybody doing math in your head. And so much more. You know, being able to live as our authentic self is something that I really feel like that we all desire to do. But sometimes we have to see someone else modeling what their authenticity can look like in order for us to be inspired to take our own courageous first steps. So this dispels the myth right here, y'all, that you're not living your life just for you. You're living your life for everyone else around you as well. How you show up either makes people braver or it makes them pull back. Okay, so this is an invitation to ask yourself, how are you living your life? Remember I said earlier how the journey of authenticity is not meant to be traveled alone? Well, this is where the power of community comes in. Y'all, this room, everyone in this room can be the difference in someone merely surviving to them flourishing and thriving. You know, in those early years of my transition, when I was ostracized from my family, when I was fired by my employer, when I was judged and ridiculed by those in my spiritual community, when I was homeless and jobless for a season, like I shared with you earlier, when I felt all alone, had it not been for me finding a trans-affirming congregation here in the Atlanta area, I shudder to think where I would be. You see, this congregation allowed me to have this experiential level of knowing who I am, that I actually am a woman, and that I would be okay in our trans, unaffirming world. This community became the wind beneath my wings. This community allowed me to try Gabrielle on. You might be thinking, what does that mean, Gabrielle? What that means is every Sunday morning, every Wednesday night, on every time the doors of that congregation was open, Gabrielle was showing up in her fullness and all of her glory. All right? This congregation allowed me to have not only the cognitive and intuitive levels of knowing of who I am, they allowed me to have this experiential level of knowing, this internal-external alignment of my outside and internal knowing of who I am. I could show up in all of those ways, y'all. They allowed me to be me on a whole new level. And as a result, they became my family. As I shared with you earlier, this community was my lifeline. They cheered me on when I succeeded. They picked me up when I felt like I couldn't take another step. In fact, some of the members of this community were my very first clients when I started my earliest vocational iteration as a trans woman. I had a cleaning company. Some of those members were my very first clients. This community also allowed me and honored and valued the gifts of ministry that I brought to that community. See, they not only allowed me to show up as me, but they were allowing me to integrate the full width, breadth, and depth of me into this community, okay? I joined the choir, which I ended up directing. By the way, I love all your songs. I was elected to serve on the executive board. I started a trans support group, and get this, I was actually invited, even encouraged, to play on the women's softball team. How about that, right? What this community didn't know is that by allowing me to bring my gifts of ministry to that congregation, they were positioning me and preparing me for my life of activism. What they didn't know, when I was up there on the chancel at that congregation, sharing certain perspectives during services or events, they didn't know that I would be working with global organizations today, helping them do and be better for my community. You see how this works? That community became a place of belonging for me. You know, some of us have to ask the question before we step into a space, am I going to be safe? Well, belonging is steps beyond safety, in my opinion. I not only was safe in this space, I knew I belonged. I knew I was a part of that community. You know, you might be thinking, Gabrielle, what does authenticity have to do with the power of community? Well, as Brene Brown says, can y'all tell I'm a Brene Brown fan? Who in here is a Brene Brown fan? Okay, y'all get me now. She says true belonging happens only when we present our authentic selves to the world. Our sense of belonging can never be greater than our own self-acceptance. Because of this, I think if we truly want to create affirming and welcoming spaces for the width, breadth, and depth of humanity, not just for gender diverse people, but for the width, breadth, and depth of humanity, we must step back, reevaluate our strategies, and focus not so much on what we must do, but who we must become. Each of us must become our authentic selves. Only you know what that looks like for you. But the beautiful thing about authenticity is that authenticity is contagious. Authenticity begets more authenticity. And where authenticity abounds, it informs how we show up, how we advocate, how we support one another. You, Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta, you have the power to leave a ripple of possibility and hope for everyone who steps through your doors. And it starts with you. I'm reminded of what Mahatma Gandhi admonishes us to do. He says, live as if you were to die tomorrow. Learn as if you were to live forever. So the question is, what will you do with that? Are you willing to live your life fiercely, out loud, unapologetically, without allowing others' expectations to determine who you should be and how you should show up? Well, I hope that you will do that, because the world needs each of you now more than ever. And so it is.